everybody, and a particular welcome to Mr. Wheatman and his two colleagues, who of course are interested on the peer application. And because this is a hybrid meeting, rather a strange expression, but a number of our officers are looking in from their own homes and places of work, I don't know where. It's just us that keep the thing ticking over properly. So again, a warm welcome, it certainly is, to everybody. And can we kick off with item 1, if any of our members has a declaration of interest to make? Could we hear it? No, shaking of heads. So we can move on to item 2, which is for you to approve or otherwise the minutes of our last meeting on the 6th of July. Do I have a proposal that I sign them as a true record? Thank you very much. There's been consternation in the ranks if you'd said no, I suspect. Thank you for that. Then, it's a matter of noting, as usual, item 3, planning enforcement appeals lodged and determined. And I think you have noticed that we have 3 decisions there. 2 applications, 2 appeals which have been lodged. I think it's just a matter of noting that and agreeing that the team do respond to those appeals. And then an interesting one, 7.1, the matter of our children's homes policy. And you will see that we were giving a year temporary use. The inspector, with a judgment of Solomon, has made it 2 years. Do you have anything to say, Miss Parker, about that?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a good decision in terms of defending the approach we've established, our 400-metre rule, and so on. I think the inspector was just responding really to the ongoing COVID circumstances and also giving the council a chance to properly implement its wider strategy. So I think overall it's a good decision for us. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And then, again, it's a matter of a report as usual, the planning enforcement update. And you will see that we've got 56 new cases being investigated, and altogether 529 matters outstanding, and the number that have been resolved either generally by agreement or by a decision not to enforce. And you'll notice too that we've got that section 215 notice for the poor condition of the property at 18 Gloucester Avenue, and that we're taking enforcement notice. The notice has now been issued. The enforcement timetable has begun on 14 Squires Gate Industrial Estate. Are we happy with that report? Thank you. And then, I don't know, I think the department is doing too well. We're expected to determine major applications, 60% within 13 weeks, and we've managed 100%. That's unreal. Nobody is perfect. And the other one for non-major applications, mostly domestic, they're supposed to do 70% within the 13-week period, and we're actually only on 93%. To what do you attribute these figures, Miss Parker? You're not working so hard. Well, quite remarkable, and I think we note that with appreciation. Can we then turn to item 6 on your agenda, which is this major proposal for Church Street, Abingdon Street corner. We did have it on our agenda last time, and we deferred any decision for this meeting, and so that some further information could be obtained on the question of viability. Ms. Parker, would you like to introduce the matter?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you say, members will recall this application from last committee, and at that meeting it was deferred to give the applicant opportunity to provide viability information to demonstrate that a housing mix compliant with policy could not be achieved. Instead, we've received amended plans that now show an acceptable housing mix. The application relates to the site on the corner of Abingdon Street and Church Street. It was formerly occupied by Next and then Pizza Express, and most recently the ground and first floor have been redeveloped as Vintro Lounge with a new frontage and a themed interior. A previous submission at the start of 2020 proposed 29 apartments in a Part 6, Part 7 storey building. This was considered to be overdevelopment of the site and unacceptable in the context, and the application was withdrawn. The current application proposes 18 apartments in a Part 3, Part 4 and Part 5 storey building. Retail and commercial uses would be retained at ground floor level, and the application is made in full and so seeks to agree all details. The building proposed would have a flat roof and the top floor would be set back. The corner facing into St John's Square would be 4 stories high, and different materials would be used on the corner to create a visual focus. Similarly, lighter materials would be used to make a focal feature of the main entrance door on Abingdon Street. The elevations proposed would have a strong grid design with vertical emphasis and recessed balconies to create depth and visual interest. And the site is clearly within a very sensitive location within the town centre conservation area and opposite both St John's Church and the Winter Gardens. The scheme has been considered by Historic England, the Theatres Trust and the Council's Built Heritage Manager and the Civic Trust. The Civic Trust have objected on the basis of scale, but the other consultees have supported the proposal in principle. In terms of scale, it should be noted that long-standing policy LQ4 and the emerging policy DM17 both require new buildings within the town centre to be at least 4 stories in height. The scale proposed accords with this and is considered to be appropriate in the immediate context. No off-street parking could be provided, but this is considered to be acceptable given its town centre location. Cycle parking is proposed at basement level and refuse storage would be available to the rear. No other issues relating to highways, drainage, ecology or amenity are anticipated. The necessary planning obligations relating to local healthcare provision and public open space could be secured through a Section 106 legal agreement. Internally, the scheme would deliver 18 apartments comprising 5 one-bed units and 13 two-bed units, which now meets the required housing mix and floor space standards. The proposal would deliver regeneration benefits and would contribute towards the borough's housing land supply, and the design is now acceptable. I am aware that this application has been in the media, and I must stress to members that the recent investment in the building to develop the current Vintro Lounge is not a material planning consideration in respect of this application. This proposal must be judged on its own merits. In terms of relative uses, if implemented, this scheme would result in the loss of commercial use at first floor only and would replace it with residential accommodation. The town centre uses would be retained at ground floor level, and this would be acceptable in planning policy terms. As such, the officer recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to appropriate conditions and the signing of a Section 106 agreement to secure health and public open space contributions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We were to have Mr. Ian White, who was here last time, as a member of the public objecting, but I understand that is he ill or is away?
Chair, he's been unable to attend tonight due to something unexpected occurring, so yeah. He sent his apologies.
Okay. So it's a matter for colleagues to discuss the matter. The recommendation by the department is that we approve this application. Does anybody wish to join in? Vice Chairman, Councillor O'Hara.
Yeah, the thing that bothers me is looking at the photographs, the actual design doesn't in any way seem to fit in with the area at all. I mean, the actual planning wise, the flats and the intentions are fine, but I just don't like the design of it. It's just going to be something strange to that square. I'm looking at the pictures that they've sent through. and they don't seem to fit in with either the Winter Gardens or any of the other buildings in the area. So that would be my objection.
Anybody else? Councillor Stansfield.
Thank you very much, Chair. We get various applications for different things within different areas, and we also always come back with, we can't really have that because it's in a whatever area. Now, we've got a proposal here for residential accommodation right in the middle of a retail centre. We've had other things in the retail area before which we haven't been in favour of. I don't see why this one should be any different, that we're now going to have living accommodation, or residential accommodation, within the town centre itself. I mean, we're actually getting further and further into our pedestrianised area, which really should be for retail and town centre development, not for residential. We've got enough areas on the outside. Can I ask, without this, do we still meet our criteria for proposed development and residential accommodation for the next 5 years, or is this part of it? Because I don't remember this being part of our list that we've come up with before.
I would potentially have to double check the exact figures. I imagine that it wouldn't actually put us into having a tilted planning balance. I think we could probably demonstrate a 5-year supply without this application coming forward, but without knowing the exact figures. That's my assumption. The one comment I would make about residential in the town centre, this is something that the government is advocating as being an appropriate use in town centres. The government is positively pushing for residential development to happen in town and city centres. I'm just having a look at the national guidance now to find the paragraph. So it is something. It is a mix of uses, not at ground floor level, I appreciate, but at upper floor level, that mix of commercial at ground floor where you have the street scene and that character with residential above it is something that the government does advocate.
Thank you, Chair. On some of the lines that Councillor O'Hara said, I feel aesthetically, looking at the building, when you look at it full on, it doesn't look too bad. But if you start from the top and you look down, then it looks as if it's pushed out very much so it becomes very close to the Winter Gardens then. My other thing about this was, I've noticed these are 1 and 2 bedroom flats, and as we say in the description of where they are, they're going to be beautiful flats because they're taking the heritage site, so the people who live there will be very lucky enough to belong to the heritage. So then does this become affordable housing for residents, or does that make it more expensive because of where it is? And because they're only 1 and 2 bedroom flats, it doesn't, to me, my worry is, and I know this is no consideration for planning really, but my worry is that they'll become second or holiday homes for people, and they won't be used as proper homes for people. So on that, Chair, I think I'm going to be object. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Baker.
I'm just interested in what the parking provisions are for the residences.
Parking, no parking. Yeah, do you want to come in, Mary?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just from last time, I mean, we have been back to them and we made some recommendations that they've actually come back and written to us now. At the last meeting, they hadn't had they've actually now changed the plans
Yes, yeah.
according to the recommendations that we agreed on last time. So they have met us halfway, haven't they? More than halfway.
Yeah, they've responded to the concerns about housing
It's
mix.
also part
yeah.
of the bigger plan, isn't it, for the council in terms of the housing in the town centre, and actually, it is part of the agenda moving forward. So I think they've met all the recommendations that we said last time.
My only concern, if I might speak, is on the weight we might give to policy CS8, which is referred to in your report, paragraph 11.4.3 on page 27. And of course, that does require that a development to enhance the setting and the views of heritage assets through appropriate design. And I'm far from convinced that what we have before us is other than jarring in its scale and unsympathetic to the important buildings in the vicinity. It's one of these buildings that every architect has in his drawer and could be yanked out to suit any particular site anywhere in the country. And I'm far from convinced that it's the ideal design for that particular setting. I've no worries about the issue of housing or, residential accommodation in the town centre. I think there's much to be appreciated in that happening. And I'm not too bothered about the height. But of course, it's the design that's all important, it seems to me. And a development in a strategically placed site should strengthen, not detract from the buildings in that townscape. And the character of the town centre there with St John's, with the Winter Gardens, I think ought to be enhanced and not affected adversely by a major development of this sort. So that's my only reservation about it, but I'm in the hands of committee on this one. Yeah, Councillor, do you want to come in?
Chair, yeah, thank you if I could come in here. I quite agree with the other councillors' remarks because I don't agree with residential being mixed with commercial. I don't think that works. And as it's a 1 and 2 bedroom flat, that could attract antisocial behaviour and whatever in town centre. That's my concerns.
I think the department in Whitehall is heavily encouraging local authorities to attract residential occupation in town centres. Not least, it's on the drawing board now, in fact it's likely to become a statutory instrument in the autumn, that shops themselves can be turned into residential accommodation. So I think there's a bit of argument about that one. Mr. Parker.
Sorry, could you just use your microphone, please?
Sorry, apologies. In terms of the provision of residential accommodation within the town centre, I'd just like to draw members' attention to paragraph 85F of the NPPF, which is a national framework, which recognises that residential development often plays an important role in ensuring the vitality of centres, and in the framework encourages residential development on appropriate sites. And then moving to policy CS17 of the core strategy, again, criteria G talks about supporting the introduction of high quality residential offer in the longer term, and also policy, I think it's SR9 of the local plan, supports provision of residential uses at upper floor level. So we do have quite a strong policy basis for introducing residential accommodation into the town centre. In terms of the points Councillor Critchley made about affordable housing, because this site is in the defined inner area, there is no policy requirement for them to provide affordable housing. So whatever the costs might be, that would depend on the fit out of the actual apartments. But in terms of the planning definition of what is affordable housing, they wouldn't meet that definition because there's no policy requirement for them to do so. And in terms of holiday homes, we are proposing a condition that would prevent the flats from being used as serviced holiday lets. But as you say, they could be purchased as second homes, and the council would have very little control over that. But that's the same of residential accommodation anywhere. In terms of parking, no, there is no parking provided. But again, it's in the town centre, and we have allowed other residential schemes where no parking is proposed because of that location. Yeah, I think that's everything that I can comment on the comments made so far. I think design is very subjective. Obviously, the government has recently released its design code, which does advise that developments should cause delight, and they've also produced a wheel that is quite useful that talks about the different elements of good design. Just bear with me 1 second.
How does it sit with our policy, Susan, on,
C7, CS8. Let me just catch it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I hate this.
So
well,
I mean,
we're supposed to be striving for good quality in design, and the more important the site, the more we should be insistent, should we not? I know design can be very personal, but there are ways of judging good design.
there are. In terms of planning policy, the policies that we do have are fairly generic in their expectations. It talks about appropriate scale, mass, height, layout, density, appearance, materials and relationship to adjoining buildings. And obviously the local plan is older than that. I think what is perhaps of greater detail for members is the wheel of considerations that make a well-designed place, and this is what forms the design code and the national design guidance. And it does talk in terms of character, about context, about developments that enhance the surroundings, having an attractive and distinctive identity, and I'm mindful that members picked up on the character and how it relates to the context of Blackpool. It talks about a coherent pattern of development, but of course the street spaces are already established around here. So yeah, I think in terms of the heritage impact, the visual impact and how it relates to the historic character of the area, they are considerations that the design code and the National Design Guide do acknowledge as being very important. So if members don't feel that the scheme proposed is well designed, then.
Chair, have we got other residential properties in town then? Can you give us an example of where it's working, or that something new's been built? Because I can't think of anywhere that's...
Perhaps not quite this central. We have granted other permissions on Bank Hay Street and Clifton Street. We have... there is residential that's developed above individual shops, where it's perhaps 1 and 2 units above Topping Street. In terms of big schemes, if you go up Church Street, the old gasworks, the white building on the corner, that's a residential scheme. I think the building next to that is residential as well. So there have been some circumstances where larger flat developments have been implemented and they have worked. As I say, it's just something that the government and all levels of planning policy are pushing this interaction and trying to bring retail into the town centre so that you have that activity, particularly out of hours, so it's a more vibrant, and there is greater support for services in the town centre throughout the day, so that you don't get the dead areas once you get into the evening.
But it's not, around that area, it's not a dead area because it's an attraction. People come visit all time of the year, don't they? So it's always a busy area, that's all. And the other thing for me is when we're building properties now, we're looking at how it impacts on climate change and what can bring to the area. And this particular building's not actually bringing anything to the area, isn't it? It's got no greenery in it, the roofs are flat, they're not mentioned doing it. Yeah, there's a bit of a paragraph where it says they might do something on the flat roofs, but they're not actually bringing anything like that into. So are the flats energy efficient? Are they going to be the ones that look into climate? Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't feel that they're enhancing the area that they're actually going into.
Right.
It's just a brick building with, to me, small flats, and the flats inside are not all the same size, and yet they still cater for the same amount of people. No,
all of the flats do meet floor space standards, so that the actual...
Well, there's some at 63 and some at 65. There's some at, so they're not, and yet they've got the same amount of people in.
But the minimum standard is 61 for a 2-bed flat.
So they've gone for the minimum standard.
Yeah, so they all surpass the minimum standard, but to varying degrees, which is why they are different. In terms of the sustainability and environmental credentials, we don't have any requirements in planning policy for specific measures to be introduced for residential accommodation. You are right, there's no green space, and they're not proposing, as far as I'm aware, significant use of the roof for anything photovoltaics or garden space. But there is nothing in our planning policies that would specifically require them to do that at the moment. So moving forward, it's something that we will be going in the direction of wanting that kind of green infrastructure introduced as standards as part of developments, but we're not quite there yet until the new local plan comes forward and then the core strategy review.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. It is a shame that our speaker tonight wasn't able to join us because we actually put him off from the last meeting that he could save his thunder for tonight. But I'm alongside you with the design and the look of the thing. We've got such iconic buildings in the area. We've got St John's Church on one side of it, Abingdon Street Market just round the corner, the old post office building. We've got the Winter Gardens, and now we're going to have a big sandstone block in the corner, which brings absolutely nothing to the area. I don't think the design fits. It certainly doesn't enhance the area. We had this a few years ago, as some colleagues will remember, when we had propositions for the old Yates's building, and we went through various levels and conversations to get something which was going to be iconic for years to come, with a modern look. And I think we need to do something like that with this. What we've got here is just a square block in the corner that's not going to make anything, give anything to the area. We've even got it in the report that it says the proposed development will clearly have an impact on the setting of the listed buildings. That says it by itself that really it's substandard to what we really want to be pushing for in Blackpool. I don't think the proposal as it is, design-wise, is one that we really want to be putting forward. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor O'Hara, you want to come back?
Yeah, no, I'm totally in agreement with what Andrew said as I raised it in the first place. I just don't think the design's going to fit in with the area, so I'd really propose that at the minute we object to it until they come back with a design that's more suitable for that area. We can't do anything about the residential or the planning side of it, but I'm sure we can insist that the town centre has decent design buildings that when people look round St John's Square, they're not going, what the heck's that? So that will be my proposal.
You're proposing that we refuse the application on the grounds of design. Is that seconded, Councillor Stansfield? Well, that's
I'll second that, Chair.
Ms Parker?
Chairman, thank you. Just before a vote is taken, can I just clarify the grounds for refusal, if that's the direction that the committee is potentially going in? The concerns are that the design is out of keeping with the location. It doesn't contribute to or enhance the setting of the nearby heritage assets or the conservation area. It's an inappropriate design that is jarring in scale and unsympathetic. It doesn't respond to the local context. Yeah.
Sympathetic to our policy, you said.
Sympathetic to okay.
That's my view. I don't know if the members associate themselves with that.
Yeah. So if reference to policies CS7 and CS8. Okay. Thank you.
I just think the bottom line is, it's been said by several people here, it's a very important corner, that St John's Square, the Winter Gardens, from a heritage point of view. So that building just doesn't fit in with the ones surrounding it and bring anything to the appearance. So it's, I think we've all got the same view, really, or most of us anyway.
Can we proceed to a vote unless anybody else wants to come in? For the reasons explained in the debate, the proposition is that we refuse the application. It's moved and seconded. Could I have those in favour of that refusal to to show. That appears to be 6, my abstaining, which is very cowardly. So those against, there aren't any, but we've got 1 abstention. That is refused.
Thank you, Chair. Can I clarify that I draft a reason for refusal and send that to you for agreement of the exact wording, Chair?
Sorry, I didn't quite...
I said, would you be happy for me to draft the reason for refusal based on the debate this evening and send that to you to agree the final
is committee
wording?
Happy with that Ms Parker and the department draft the reasons in detail for refusal without coming back to committee?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Some of these aren't easy matters for the department, and a great deal of work has gone into preparing this report and the investigation, and I wouldn't want the message to go back that we're dissatisfied with the quality of the work. We're not. It's a very balanced argument, and the recommendation for approval was well supported. On the other hand, it's for us to make strategic decisions which affect our town and its look. So I think with those comments, I don't want Claire Johnson to think that she's not giving us a thoroughly rehearsed reasons and appraisal on that particular application. Thank you. And then we turn to item 7, which is the planning application for the land immediately to the east of Central Pier. A massive report and assessment in front of you. Ms Parker, do you want to come in and start the batting? Women play cricket these days, don't they? Yeah, very well too.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know, I'm afraid. Okay. This application relates to land immediately to the north of Central Pier. Members may recall that planning permission has previously been granted for the use of the land for a tourist attraction, namely an 18-hole themed golf course. The application relates to an outdoor bar that has been erected on the site without planning permission and is currently in use. It therefore seeks retrospective planning permission. The application is made in full and so seeks to agree all details. The bar comprises 3 single-storey flat-roofed enclosures housing the bar, storage and toilet facilities. The rest of the site is occupied by raised decking for external seating with a canopy over part of it. And there is also a small covered stage at the corner of the decking. Members will have noted the fairly lengthy update note. This has been prepared in response to a council opinion submitted by the applicant and received yesterday. And in further response to this, I would also like to read out additional comments received today from the Council Heritage Officer. She writes, I refer to the application to retain the bar and associated works on land adjacent to Central Pier. My comments are as follows. Under the terms of the National Planning Policy Framework, Central Pier is a non-designated heritage asset. It was adopted onto the Council's local list of buildings of local architectural and/or historic interest, otherwise known as the local list, in 2016. It also faces the locally listed Huntsman building, the former Central Beach Cinema, and the boundary of the Foxhole Conservation Area. Notwithstanding its proximity to other designated and undesignated heritage assets, the character of the pier itself was hitherto enhanced by its open setting on the promenade and its view of the sea and beach. Historically, the town's 3 piers were the only structures on the promenade, with the exception of the locally listed Metropole Hotel to the north of North Pier. This setting has been preserved to a large degree by council policy to protect its most precious resource, under Saved Policy RR7, paragraph 2.57, and Emerging Policy DM10. Paragraph 189 of the NPPF states that in determining applications, local planning authorities should require an applicant to describe the setting of any heritage assets affected, including any contribution made by their setting. The heritage statement accompanying the application has analysed the significance of the pier and concluded that the bar complements the modern facade of the pier and would not unduly affect its significance because the Victorian structure does not become apparent until it is traversed out to sea. Paragraph 3.5 of the heritage statement also states that the proposed site provides little in the way of historical value as an open piece of land on the promenade. However, this open piece of land forms part of the setting, allowing views of the Victorian substructure and the beach and sea beyond. Indeed, paragraph 3.3 of the Heritage Statement acknowledges this in saying, "The evidential value of the pier's setting has been retained to some extent within the immediate vicinity. The promenade has long been a wide open area, and in recent years the proposal at site has been used for ancillary entertainment uses." It is clear that the modern and poor quality bar area, which is clearly intended not to be temporary, undermines the setting of the pier by obscuring the view of the historic substructure and the sea. It is a visual intrusion in an otherwise open setting for the pier, and neither preserves nor enhances its significance as required by paragraph 192 of the MPPF. Paragraph 197 of the MPPF states that the effect of an application on the significance of a non-designated heritage asset should be taken into account in determining the application. In weighing applications that directly or indirectly affect non-designated heritage assets, a balanced judgment will be required, having regard to the scale of any harm or loss and the significance of the heritage asset. It is my view that the level of harm to the pier is such that the retrospective application should be refused on the grounds that the development does not preserve or enhance its significance and is harmful to the setting. The application proposes a main town centre use in an edge of centre location. The site falls within the resort core, but officers do not accept that the bar can be considered to be a tourist attraction in its own right. It is physically separate from the pier and faces away from it. Beyond ownership and proximity, there is nothing to link or integrate the bar into the pier offer. The MPPF requires the application to demonstrate compliance with the sequential test, both because it is a main town centre use and because it's in a flood zone, but no information to demonstrate this has been provided. In addition, the applicant has not provided any information to demonstrate that the proposal would not have an adverse impact on designated centres. As such, the proposal is considered to be contrary to Policy CS4 of the core strategy. Policy CS21 of the core strategy is supportive of the development of new high-quality tourist attractions and the improvement and enhancement of existing tourist attractions. It is also supportive of new venues and event spaces that can accommodate a year-round programme of events, festivals and conferences. As stated, the bar in itself is not considered to be a tourist attraction. Such uses have their place in supporting the wider resort core offer and could be acceptable as part of an integrated and comprehensive redevelopment of the pier head to enhance the pier as a tourist attraction. But this proposal is merely for a standalone bar in close proximity to and within the same ownership as the pier. It is accepted that the bar has been trading and generating an income for the pier, and it is also acknowledged that the pier has suffered fire damage in recent years. However, the applicant has not submitted any information to demonstrate that the pier relies upon the bar in order to operate viably as a tourist attraction, or that the income is needed to fund essential repairs following the fire. Members should note that, should planning permission be refused, the Council would still look to work with the applicant to secure closure of the bar over a time period that would not unduly compromise the operation of the pier itself. The bar would constrain and potentially prejudice the comprehensive redevelopment and improvement of the pier head. It would, for example, preclude the development of the previously approved adventure golf attraction. The small stage included within the bar is insufficient for the use to be considered as an acceptable event space, and as such the policy is not considered to comply with Policy CS21, both in terms of its use or quality. The site is in a prominent and highly visible location in close proximity to heritage assets, including the locally listed pier, and it is therefore visually sensitive. A high-quality solution is therefore required both to respond to this context and support the Council's strategy for resort regeneration. The structures and canopies are highly visible due to the open nature of the area and have not been designed to integrate well with the sensitive surroundings. They exacerbate the sense of visual clutter around the pier head and detract from the setting of the pier. The materials and design are not considered to be appropriate or of sufficient quality for this prime location. The applicant has suggested that the Council has failed in its duty to specify the changes that would be needed to make the bar acceptable in design terms. However, it is not for officers to be unduly prescriptive or to provide a design solution for the applicant, particularly given that the proposal is considered to be unacceptable in principle. The development compromises the open character of the area of the promenade and obstructs views of the seaward end of the pier. and this heritage and visual impact must be balanced against the public benefits of the scheme. As the bar is not accepted as a tourist attraction complying with policy CS21, and in the absence of any demonstration that the bar is necessary to support the pier as a tourist attraction, insufficient public benefit is identified to justify the harm that is considered to arise. It is accepted that the site is in an accessible location and that no insurmountable issues relating to amenity are identified. Nevertheless, on balance, the scheme is considered to be contrary to planning policy, as it is a main town centre use in an edge of centre location, because it does not meet the expectations of policy CS21, and because it is considered to be unacceptable in terms of visual and heritage impact. And so on this basis, members are respectfully recommended to refuse planning permission for the reasons given. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Parker, for introducing the subject. I'm going to ask Mr Wheatman if he'd like to come in now and give the views of the applicant and his agent.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. As has already been mentioned by Ms Parker, members will have seen that the applicant commissioned a specialist planning barrister to address the officer's report, and the extensive document that you have in front of you comprehensively addresses all the issue and concludes quite rightly, in my professional opinion, that the original report was flawed for a number of reasons. You have also got an addendum officer's report that partially rebuts some of those comments from the barrister but reaffirms their position. Just as a point opening up, the application does not seek retrospective planning permission but seeks permission retrospectively. There is no such thing as retrospective planning permission. Enforcement. The rebuttal in front of you, members, contains some information. It is suggested by officers that this has gone ahead without any contact with the council. That is factually incorrect. One of the directors of the company, Rennie Sedgwick, had a conversation with the heritage manager when the bar was in its early format. Mr Carrington was aware of its existence and gave no instruction as to what was needed in relation to planning. He appeared, according to the director, quite relaxed about the situation and said, "Don't worry about it." The topic of the conversation was in connection with the planning requirements that may have been needed. It is accepted that at the time of the conversation the bar was not in its current format, and the company has subsequently ploughed on with the project without seeking advice or consulting the council. But to say it has not ever consulted the council, planning officers, or any other officer is factually incorrect. With regard to licensing, a license has been granted for the premises, and the council's rebuttal says they are separate regimes. That is correct. However, Section 182 of the Licensing Act guidance states that when licensing is considered, responsible authorities under the 2003 Act are automatically notified of all applications. That includes the planning department. And at no time has the planning department raised issues with regard to the license. There is a duty for councils to be coherent and joined up. That has not occurred. So to say simply that it is a separate regime doesn't necessarily deal with the issue properly. I think we need to concentrate a little bit more about the definition of a tourist attraction. We can argue all day, Ms Parker and I, about what the definition of a visitor or tourist attraction is. However, I maintain my position and that of the barristers that the council's assessment is incorrect. Those of you who are familiar with Tyneside will know that there was a floating bar on the Tyne called the Tuxedo Princess, a well-established floating bar. That was a tourist attraction in itself. The bars on Canal Street in Manchester are a tourist attraction in themselves. A gin tasting session at a distillery is a tourist attraction. Tourist attractions cover multiple different land uses. National parks are tourist attractions. Country houses are tourist attractions. Pleasureland is a tourist attraction. The piers are tourist attraction. Land use is not a defining issue, therefore. It can't be. The lights are a tourist attraction in Blackpool. They are not a defined land use. So for the council officer in the rebuttal to say it's not the land use, we deal with land use and land use only, that's not correct when you're interpreting what a tourist attraction is. A tourist attraction is something that brings economic and benefits and income from people who are travelling or visiting a place for pleasure. That is the definition of a tourist. And the Supreme Court requires, where there is no planning definition, that you use simple words. That is the ruling of the Supreme Court in terms of planning. And this meets that test. The problem is the council's policy doesn't define a tourist attraction. The Shrewsbury neighbourhood plan does. Just for example, I found that out today when I was researching for tonight. But yours doesn't. The second issue is one around the words ancillary. Again, there is no legal definition in law, in planning law, of the word ancillary. However, it is commonly understood to be subservient, subordinate, or secondary. In other words, it has to have a functional connection with the main use or building. There is no requirement, as the officer's report says, for it to be physically attached to a building. It just needs to have a subordinate purpose to the main building or the main use. For example, an ancillary domestic use, a granny annex, for example, doesn't necessarily have to be physically attached to the main house, but it's still ancillary. So again, we have a different interpretation of the words within your policies. With regard to heritage, obviously the original officer's report did not carry out, as far as I'm concerned, its statutory duty under Section 66(1) of the Listed Buildings Act, that it demonstrated that the officer concerned making his representations had worked through the relevant sections of the MPPF before reaching his conclusion.
1 minute remaining.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a town centre use, but a very specific type of bar. It is a seafront bar. It is an open-air seafront bar, and it is designed to capture the outdoor seafront experience. It is there to serve the piers. It is there to bring finance back to the piers. The fire, COVID, the closure of the piers has seriously damaged the finances of the company. This bar alone provides 47% of all the bar income from all 3 piers. Without it, there would be job losses. Without it, the company could not generate enough income to carry out repairs and renewals on the 3 piers, included the more important listed North Pier. We can't discuss these because we're on YouTube, but that information would be available if this application was deferred and officers and the applicants could get together. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wheatman. I'm a little concerned on how the council, and we of course represent the council as a whole, is to respond to these representations made so fluently and eloquently by Mr. Wheatman, but more particularly in Sarah Clover's opinion. And I note that it's dated 31st of July, and today is the 3rd of August. Now, it may be, colleagues, that council did submit an earlier version of her opinion, but I fear that we would be doing ourselves an injustice were we to make a decision tonight, both in the interests of the applicant and in the other interests of this council. I don't think, in short, that we have had sufficient time to consider this 28-page opinion. As Mr. Wheatman said in his introductory remarks, this lady is a very experienced planning counsel, and I think it would be remiss of us not to have a fully formed rebuttal of what is in this opinion if the recommendation for refusal is to be sustained. I think our planning team have made a very a very fair and quick response to that opinion in the update note. I think it's a very brave riposte put together in a very short space of time, and I commend them for that. But I think it would be wrong tonight, in the light of the information we've received, for us to make a decision on this important application. And I don't know what members feel, but I would recommend that we defer a decision on this application until perhaps our next meeting, so that the department, the council as a whole, with its officers on the legal side, who may be minded to take their own council's opinion on the points, particularly that Mr. Wheatman has referred to. I'm in your hands. Councillor Stansfield, did you indicate?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'm quite with you on that. It's quite a statement that's been made tonight, along with the report that's been submitted, with very short time to consider all the points that are in it. And I think you're quite right. To make a decision tonight would be very foolish without giving this serious consideration, and I think we should defer it to our next meeting. I will propose that, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I've just had a quick look at the dates of the next meeting and the date by which a report would have to be presented to Democratic Services. And if we are going to consider these the representations properly and get our own legal advice, I think we might struggle to do that in the time available. So could I ask that we return it to the October committee rather than September?
But perhaps you could just defer it to future meetings.
Yeah, if that would be okay.
So that you could
Yes.
seek advice on how long it will take.
Thank you.
Yeah, very happy with that. Thank you, Chair.
I keep forgetting to press this wretched button. My arms aren't long enough. There's been a proposal that we defer it to a suitable meeting. Is that agreed? Would you please show? Thank you very much. You'll take that away with you, Mr. Wheatman and colleagues. No decision as yet. You can carry on trading and all the rest of it. You'll probably get the summer season 2021 in quite handsomely. Thank you very much indeed. Our next meeting is the 7th of September. We've noted that. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, here and in cyberspace, for your contributions. We'll meet again in September. Thank you very much.